Welcome to Fox 55's Green and Gold Gridiron.
We have a big win to talk about on this edition of Fox 55's Green and Gold Gridiron. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Groff alongside G3 analyst Bill Ferrario.
I'm excited to be here. It was a real big win, and I'm excited to talk about it today.
Great to see the Packers get a win going down to Soldier Field and doing just that. Jana Wimmer and Keith Rodink will be along shortly. Let's start out with the Packers and the Bears. It's their primordial enemies, the Chicago Bears. The Packers offense really bounced back to life, and we saw what Aaron Rodgers can do when he has some time to throw the football, and I think put more on his shoulders and allow the game plan to move a little bit more toward the aerial attack rather than just kind of running Eddie Lacy into a line.
They did. I think Aaron said what he needed to do in the press conference, and he stood up and did it. And the rest of the team followed. The receivers got open when they needed to get open. They made big plays when they had to. And obviously I'm biased, but that O-line that blocked well, they moved the front seven of the Chicago Bears, and it all starts up front, and O-line played well. The rest of the team followed suit.
Big difference is they took advantage of the red zone trips, and the Bears are very good defensively when it comes to that category.
They did. You know, as a defense, you don't ever want to give up points, especially touchdowns. And I think in this game, we took advantage of the red zone. We walked out with more touchdowns than we did field goals, and obviously there was no punts in the game. So a lot of high-scoring offense in Sunday's game.
Jay Cutler pulled a Houdini act a couple times, and the Packers' run defense is not good at the bottom of the league right now. What kind of things are you seeing out of them that concerns you, and maybe it gets overshadowed because it was a victory?
I think the few concerns are we're giving up a lot of rushing yards. We're giving up a lot of third down conversions. But the positive is any team has on their defensive chart in their film room, the number one goal for every Sunday's game is to give up 17 points or less. If you do that, the odds are saying you're going to win that game, and they only gave up 17 points. So the way I look at it, if we only give up 17 points a game, I love our defense, and I was happy with the way they played on Sunday.
It definitely didn't look like it was going to go that way, the way it started, but because of the Packers and their offense, Aaron Rodgers with a terrific day on Sunday. With more on that, we send it over to Jana Wimmer. Hello, Jana.
Hey guys, and you guys started talking about it. The Packers offense really bounced back with a lights-out performance Sunday in Chicago, and they picked up the 700th regular season win in Packers history. We take a closer look in this week's Breaking the Huddle. After that loss in Detroit 2 weeks ago, Randall Cobb talked about actually being embarrassed in his performance, but he really came back, stepped up this week, and guys, he wasn't the only one that stepped up.
And part of that attack was the tight end position. Richard Rodgers had a couple catches to help open things up right off the bat.
I think the tight ends did well, and I go back to the O-line. They blocked well. They gave Rodgers more time. They gave the receivers time to get open. But ultimately, yes, the tight ends have been lacking all season long, and came up with a couple nice receptions.
It is time for us to take a break. When we come back, we will introduce you to our special guest, a man with local ties to our area, former running back and kick returner for the Green Bay Packers. Stick around. Much more to come here on Green and Gold Gridiron. Welcome back to Fox 55's Green and Gold Gridiron. I'm Brian Groff, Bill Ferrario, our G3 analyst. Also pleased to welcome from Packer Report Magazine, Keith Rodink.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Nice to be back again. Always nice after a win, and especially against the Bears.
And the man sitting in between Keith and Bill is a local guy for us. Growing up in Greenwood, played his college football at St. Norbert College, and then drafted by and played for the Green Bay Packers in the early 70s. How about a warm G3 welcome for Larry Krause?
Thank you.
Larry, glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's real nice of you to have me over here. I love coming to Wausau. I grew up just 50 miles from here. My sisters lived here since the 60s. My aunt and cousin live here. We actually lived here in the late 70s and early 80s. So, yeah, we love Wausau.
And you now live north of Anago. And you mentioned the 1960s, and this kind of goes directly into your career. Growing up in this area and watching the Vince Lombardi Packers, Vince had moved on, but then you come in, there's another regime, you move into Green Bay. What was that like for you, a guy born and raised in Wisconsin to play for the Green Bay Packers?
Well, it was very unique, and I always felt very privileged to be that guy who was lucky enough to be able to grow up on a farm in western central Wisconsin, watch the Packers, die-hard Packer fans, went to St. Norbert College where Green Bay still has their training camp. We'd see Vince Lombardi walking around the lunchroom and things, and we were all in awe of that. And then to be fortunate enough to get picked in the 17th and final round of the 70 draft, and lo and behold, made the team. My rookie year was probably my best year. Phil Bankston was our head coach. Got to play with a lot of Hall of Famers. That whole rookie year was kind of like a dream. It was a good dream.
Well, that was a very tumultuous time in Packer history with Devine. I think 25, 27, and 1, but he was just a very controversial figure. And of course, the John Hadel trade with 2 first round, 2 second rounds, a third. What was that atmosphere like?
Well, it was the transition from Vince Lombardi and the glory years to trying to rebuild. And I believe Dan Devine was the first college coach that was hired and went into the NFL. And it was an entirely different business. And he really struggled trying to be the leader of this team and just never was able to pull it off. Every year we were in turmoil, and it was just went from one thing to the other. Speaking of the John Hadel trade, I remember we traded a 1 and a 2, the Lawrence Welk trade, a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2. Well, I couldn't wait to get to practice to see who this guy was. And I come in, we're going, hey, where's John Hadel? They're going, well, that's him over there. I'm going, God, that guy looks like my dad, I mean, he was old, and, I'm going, wow, we traded that many guys for him? And I think that was a vengeance trade. I think Dan knew he was on his way. I think he already had the job in Notre Dame sewed up. And I think he's going to do a little damage before he left. It worked. It worked. He was pretty good at that, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the backstory. You were cut by the Packers, and the Steelers wanted you, but a phone call was placed to Art Rooney Sr. that allowed you to stay in Green Bay. Could you kind of give us the background on what happened there and how you were allowed to stay with Green Bay?
That was really interesting. It came down to the last cut, and at that time, we had a 40-man roster, and if you got cut the last cut, you were open to waivers, and any team could claim you. But if they claimed you on the last cut, they had to put you on their 40-man roster. Now, the team that put you on waivers had the option to recall you, but then they had to put you on their 40-man roster. So I'm sitting in training camp, trying to figure out if I'm going to make the team or not, down to the last cut. And I get a call from my dad, and he goes, hey, what are you doing in Green Bay? And I go, well, I'm in camp. He goes, no, they cut you. And I said,
your
what?
Dad found out first.
Yeah. Well, the Steelers had called our house.
Oh, okay.
And they said, is Larry there? And my dad said, well, no, he's in Green Bay. And he says, well, he'll be home pretty soon. And so he says, the Steelers want you in Pittsburgh by tomorrow. I said, well, it was about 10 o'clock at night. And I said, I can get there. And so I went to Pat Pepler, who was our player personnel guy. And I said, hey, Pat, what's going on? And he goes, oh, man, we weren't supposed to be, you weren't supposed to be called that quick. He says, I got to go talk to Phil Bankston and see if he wants to keep you. And I said, well, I'm going to go up and pack my bag because I'm going to get in my car and drive all night to Pittsburgh. So I said, I got to know. So I had my bags packed. I was going out the door, and then Pat came in and said, no, I talked to Phil. He wants to keep you. And that's how I knew I made the team. Wow. And then so I guess I was actually a Steeler for a few hours. And so then we went to Green Bay. We went to Pittsburgh that year later on in the season, and I returned the opening kickoff 100 yards against them. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. 7th longest, right?
And that's fantastic. 100 yards, 7th longest in team history. What do you recall of that play?
Well, I remember it was cold, snowy, and I always liked a slow track because it brought everybody back down to my speed, so it kind of helped me a little bit. But I do remember it was very cold and snowy, and kickoff, they kind of skipped it along about the 10-yard line, and I fielded it. And, I had a couple returns that year that I was like just one guy away from going, and got to thinking, is it ever going to happen? And boy, just kind of everything opened up, and I cut to the side and went up the sidelines, and that was it.
And what was your 40 time that they had to bring people
Well,
down?
I don't know
Because
that.
I heard somebody talking.
We don't want to talk about that. Well, they had a young guy named L.C. Greenwood who ended up being an all-pro and extremely good player. And he was a rookie, so he was on the kickoff team. And the second kickoff, we collided, and we were both pretty well knocked out. And I always said, I'm always going to walk off the field. Somehow I'm going to get up. So I got up, I staggered off, and I looked back, and I go, he's still down. And they had to come and get him. So that was, I got knocked out a guy named Greenwood, and I was from Greenwood. So that was kind of cool.
Those are fantastic stories.
Yeah.
We're going to turn our attention now to our Titletown topics. And for number 1, let's send it to Jana.
For topic number 1, we take a look at the last game. The Packers had a huge goal line stand as time ran out at the end of the first half. Kept the Bears off the board at that moment. They went into the locker room. Packers came back out and they got the ball to start the second half and pretty much dominated from there. Guys, do you think that was a big momentum shift in that game?
Bill, you can start.
I think it was a huge momentum shift. Anytime, especially with our defense, with some of the suspect situations we've been in with giving up the third down conversions, giving up the points, the rushing yards, to be able to hold the Chicago Bears the way we did at the end of the half, I think he gave us a ton of momentum. And also a good story to talk about with Micah Hyde and the other defender blocking the goal line where we can't see the instant replay.
I think that was the play of the game. I mean, they were up 21-17 at that time. They were going to get the ball in the second half, play the game. Clinton Dix is an amazing player. I think he'll be starting by Halloween. I think Morgan Burnett in his big contract should be looking over his shoulder.
Yeah, he's got good instincts. All right, topic 2, Jana.
Looking ahead, we have the Packers and Vikings this week. Obviously, both teams coming off big wins. It's a short week, though. That turnaround from Sunday to Thursday, how does that change the way the players prep for this game, and a big rivalry game at that?
What do you think, Larry? Quick turnaround and playing on a Thursday.
Well, it's hard on them, and Bill played much later than I did, and the body takes a heck of a pounding, and to be able to have to come back on a Thursday after a Sunday game, it's tough, and it's a different. Your whole your game plan is done different. Your practices are different, and football players are creatures of habit. They like to get into a habit, and they like that. And when you take them out of it, it's a little different and a little difficult. My rookie year was the first year of Monday Night Football, and that was a change for us. I mean, especially our guys. They never played. It was Sunday. Now we're playing on Monday, and everybody was, well, this is never going to work.
It did.
I think with a quick turnaround, you don't know if you're going to get Ponder or if you're going to get Teddy Bridgewater. Bridgewater looked great in his debut, over 300 yards passing. He ran for a touchdown. Matt Asiato and the suddenly apparent Vikings ground game. So I don't know. I feel like Green Bay's got 2 games to show that they can not only stop the run, but how about running the ball, which for me means James Stark's getting more carries.
And Bill, the coaches were already looking at the Vikings at the end of last week and immediately looking at that film on their way back to Green Bay.
Absolutely. The coaches are already prepared for it. It's the players, like Larry said. I think 2 football guys here, as Larry was speaking, I was already thinking about the creatures of habit. In a football player's mind, you're looking at it every Monday's the same, every Tuesday's the same, and now with these Thursday games, all of a sudden a Monday becomes a Wednesday, a Tuesday becomes a Thursday, and everything gets bumped up, sped up, and not only is it a short week, you're playing on the road. So there's a lot of challenges this week, but coming off a nice win, at least you have positivity going into that Monday as opposed to looking at mistakes and correcting mistakes after a loss.
We are halfway through our topics. We will do our quick turnaround and come back and do topics 3 and 4.
Welcome back to Green and Gold Gridiron. We are at Scotty's in Schofield. We've touched on our first 2 Titletown topics, and now it's time for topic number 3, where we take a look around the NFL. Steve Smith went off on his old team, the Panthers, 139 yards and 2 touchdowns. He even called out that he was going to have a big game. Bill, you played with this guy. How about that?
I did, and I'm excited for Steve to be able to play as well as he's played. It's always huge going up against your former team, and I guess I got to add a little funny story. When I went into Carolina was having one of those rough years like the Packers had a couple years ago where they had a bunch of injuries. I think I was the 16th guy signed to the team after they put 16 guys on IR, and I walk in the locker room my day one of practice, and Steve comes walking up to me, all 4'11" of him, and tries talking trash to me like I'm a rookie or something, and he's like the mother bear of the den, going to take care of his locker room. And, he starts talking a little trash, and I pull him aside, like, give him that, like, adult man hug and whisper in his ear, like, hey, I don't know where you grew up and where you came from, but you don't talk to people like me like that. So, it was sort of like a little bit of controversy at the beginning, but the next 2 weeks were a little rough with him when we passed each other in the locker room, but we got to become closer. I helped out with a lot of his charity events. But watching a guy like that, clearly I joke about his height, but he is undersized. It's clear as day. And I think for a guy like that, you have that on your shoulders all the time. You've been told in high school and college, coming into the pros, you're too short, you're not good enough, you're not going to make it. And to see that he's 35 years old, he's had 400 yards already in the first 4 games. He's been leading the NFL or at the top of the NFL in receivers. He really works that much harder and does a great job at what he does. And it's fun to watch him, and it's an honor to say I was a teammate of his, and it's just exciting to see he's still doing what he does.
I knew there was that connection. That's why we set you up for that one. Jana,
I'm always ready
number
for that,
4.
For topic number 4, we always get some fans involved. So I have Ken Weissman here, and he has a question for you guys.
Hi. I think anybody that watched the game Sunday saw a couple of bad calls by the officials, at least. Can you guys comment on that? And then as a player, how do you keep your composure when calls like that go against you?
Larry, you want to chime in on that one? It was more than a couple.
I saw
there
like
were
5,
a few.
6, 7.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at the composure that Mike McCarthy keeps. I mean, he's got class act. And going back to the Seattle fiasco few years ago, but I don't think I have the mentality to be able to put up with that stuff. I mean, some of that call this week where they had the wrong team. I mean, that should not be that hard.
Hands to the face.
I mean, you should be able to see who's pulling whose face mask here. And but it's as players, I don't think is as hard as I think as a coach. I don't know how a coach does it, to tell you the truth.
And it went both ways, and we pointed that out too. There was the bad spot with Jordy Nelson. There was a touchdown taken away. Look at the other. Yeah, there were a couple. There were probably 5 that you could probably point out.
Yeah, the Peppers one was really obvious. Then you had, Jay Cutler has the fumble on the 4th and 1, picks it up and runs. You have Sam Shields comes along and it touches him on the helmet. You probably just need to stay away from that area of the body when you're downing a player. But there was no forcible contact, and they brought Mike Pierre on, who even said as much. And just those penalties. And Bill, I'll let you talk about the phantom holding calls on Lindsley.
I'm gonna set the
points
record
off the board.
I'm gonna set the record straight here for all fans. The worst officiating call in the National Football League is when an offensive lineman pancakes a defender, but it happens to be on a pass play. The defender's body torques a little, and he gets pushed to the ground. Because he's twisted, every official every time calls it a holding. Now, Lindsley did have his hand outside. His right hand was on the outside shoulder, but it was his left hand that put him down. It was basically one man overpowering another and putting him on the ground. But because of the angle, because of where the official was positioned, it always gets called as a hold. And like Larry was asked before about how to hold your composure, I think you just, as a professional, there's 2 ways to go. You could either get in the ref's face, yell about it, get a 15-yard, same with coaches. And I think that's where you see professionals try their best to keep their cool and maintain the play of the game. There's going to be good calls, there's going to be bad calls. You have to know how the officials call it and know how to play within those rules. Holding's illegal. Every offensive lineman sometimes grabs a little jersey. You have to know where to grab and when to grab.
Worst thing about that was the play Rodgers scrambles. Beautiful pass across his body. Ball probably goes 45 yards in the air. Devontae Adams streaking through the end zone, touchdown, 34 yards.
That would have been one for the ages. That wraps up our conversation with our Titletown topics. When we come back, we will have Bill's breakdown, and Jana will fill us in on the updates for Fox 55 Pick'ems. Thanks again for joining us here on Fox 55's Green and Gold Gridiron. Time for us to move into Bill's breakdown. And for this one, there are a lot of touchdowns through the air, but we're going to focus on the rushing touchdown by Eddie Lacy.
Absolutely. As we always say, it starts with the offensive line, and we're going to see in this play, when you're down in the red zone on the goal line, I think the ball starts here on the 2-yard line. You want to get about a half a yard to a yard movement to be successful on offense. You can see here on this play, every offensive lineman and the tight ends actually put their guy into the end zone. So you're basically, all Eddie Lacy has to do is basically get about a half a yard of movement, and he scores a touchdown. You can see here, all but one guy's feet are actually in the end zone there. So talk about the success of an offensive line. Makes it very easy to coach, very easy for the running back to see the hole, take advantage of the opportunity. I love that every single time.
I knew you would, and that capped a 6-play, 81-yard drive in just 2 minutes, 22 seconds. That's Bill's breakdown. How about our Fox 55 pick'ems? We'll let Jana take this part away because she's moved ahead in the standings.
I did. I went 3-0 last week. Just everyone doubted the Vikings. I'm the only one that picked them, and now I went 3-0 last week. So I just wanted to let you guys know that.
Relax. It's a long season.
Okay.
It's a long
Aaron Rodgers
season.
is here, everybody.
Just relax.
Okay, so we're going to start with the Bears at Panthers this week. I'm going with Panthers.
I'm going with the Panthers as well.
Bears.
Panthers.
Bears, they're bringing it back.
Next,
right.
we have Bills at Lions. Announced a new quarterback for the Bills. I'm going Lions.
I'm going to go Lions as well. Only because Jana picked them.
Any quarterback from the Bills, I'm still picking the Lions.
Lions.
Going Lions.
All right.
And then for the last one, we have Vikings at Packers. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to wear these with pride on Thursday, just so everybody knows, but I'm going to go with the Packers.
Well, that's a good.
That's a good choice.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the Packers as well. This is their chance to put a couple good days together, and I think they can do that even with the quick turnaround against the Minnesota Vikings.
No. Packers.
Of course, the Packers.
Even though you're wearing purple.
Me? We're going to Packers.
This
I
is
think
for-
if the Vikings win, you should have to wear these for the next show, though.
Are those fat
I
man
don't know about that.
footballs, or? Well,
And-
I clearly won't have to wear them for the next show, so that'd be funny.
The Bears-Panthers game you can see on Fox 55 at noon on Sunday. Our thanks to Larry Krause. Thanks for joining us
you.
this evening.
Thanks for having me.
For Bill
Appreciate it.
Ferrario, Keith Rording, Jana Wimmer, I'm Brian Groff. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you for watching Fox 55's Green and Gold Gridiron.